Hi everyone, the Sports Guy Show is here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about 24 hours away from the start of NFL free agency. And the Carolina Panthers have a tough decision when it comes to free agency. Carolina Panthers signed Greg Hardy, defensive end Greg Hardy, last week to the one-year franchise tender. So Hardy is going to make roughly $13.5 million. Now Carolina, as I stand right now, 2:47 in the afternoon, March the 10th, Carolina has 18 free agency still left on the market for the start of free agency tomorrow. After today, Carolina agreed to a 2-year extension with fullback / tight end Richard Brackle. Also, they agreed to a 1-year deal with offensive guard / offensive tackle Gary Williams. Carolina right now has less than $7 million to spend on free agency. Now, of course, Carolina can restructure the deal of defensive end Charles Johnson. They can agree to a long-term deal with Greg Hardy. Doing both of these things will free up cap room for Carolina. When I'm looking at free agency, areas of need for the Panthers, also including the draft, 3 areas that come to mind that Panthers need to address in the free agency as well as in the draft. I'm talking about offensive linemen, I'm talking about wide receiver and secondary. These 3 areas Carolina must address. When we're talking about the offensive linemen, this is a very deep field. Talking about Michael Orr, Anthony Collins, Brandon Albert, 3 of the top offensive tackles who are going to be available in free agency. And Carolina is not going to sign, I believe, any of these guys. Also, you can add Eugene Monroe to this list. Brandon Albert is apparently close to a deal with the Dolphins and is going to probably sign it tomorrow once free agency get underway. And the Anthony Collins, Eugene Monroe, and Anthony and Michael Orr, all 3 of them are going to be probably too expensive for Carolina to afford. So when we're looking at other guys who Carolina might be able to afford, one of them that come to mind is Austin Howard. Austin Howard is 27 years old, can play tackle, perhaps even guard, but it's more suitable for right tackle. Carolina sign him, can move him to left tackle. He's going to be a free agent tomorrow. The Jets are reportedly trying to lock him to a long-term deal before free agency get underway, but if the Jets are successful in keeping Howard, Carolina should definitely look at Howard. It's probably going to be cheaper than Brandon Albert, Michael Orr, and Anthony Collins and Eugene Monroe. Is probably going to be much cheaper to sign than these guys. And he's a very reliable tackle. Also, 2 more other guys that Carolina should definitely look at. One of them is Eric Weston. He's 30 years old. He played for the Cardinals last season. Can play guard. Can also play tackle. So it's probably going to be cheaper to sign. So Carolina should definitely look at him. And finally, Zach Sharif. I hope I pronounce his last name correctly. If I don't, please let me know. Sharif is 30 years old, played for the Saints last year. The Saints probably won't be able to keep him considering they themselves have cap problem. They need to find a way to keep Jimmy Graham tied in. Jimmy Graham. So Sharif can play guard, but he's mostly a tackle. He will be a great addition for the Panthers, and probably he won't be expensive to sign. Now when we're looking at wide receiver, Carolina has to make a decision quickly when it comes to Steve Smith. Do you keep him or do you release him? If I'm the Panthers, since it doesn't make any sense to cut him, I simply keep him. And I try to get an additional great wide receiver besides Steve Smith. The one guy that every Carolina Panthers fan, or I should say the vast majority of Carolina Panthers fan wants the Panthers to sign, is Akiem Hicks. Akiem Hicks played at Independence High School. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina. He played at the University of North Carolina. Dave Gettleman, former Giant GM, drafted Akiem Hicks. So they know one another very well. But Akiem Hicks, chances are, is going to be looking to a deal that Carolina cannot afford. Now if Knicks take your hometown discount, then Carolina should definitely consider signing Akiem Hicks. But if not, there are other pretty good options out there. Not as good as Knicks, I should say, but probably not going to be expensive. One of them is Sidney Rice, is from Gaffney, which is 1 hour from Charlotte. He attended the University of South Carolina. He's only 27 years old. The thing with Rice is becoming injury prone. Last 2 years, he was out. So, if Carolina can do a 1-year deal with him, that is fine. Have to be probably around the league minimum. Other than that, I will stay away from Sidney Rice if I'm Carolina. And instead I would looking at 2 wide receivers. 2 of them are restricted, meaning you will have to give up something. Actually, for one of them you will have to give up something. For the other, you don't. I'm talking about Andrew Atkins, wide receiver for the Bengals. Now, the reason you don't hear about Hawkins that much is because the Bengals have A.J. Green, Muhammad Sanu, and Marvin Jones. But Hawkins is a very good wide receiver, folks. He's probably underrated, and he played for another team, perhaps Cleveland, Buffalo, Jacksonville. You would have heard of Hawkins much more, but as I mentioned before, the Bengals have probably the best wide receiver in the NFL, A.J. Green. They have great receiver calls, so you don't hear so much about Hawkins. Another wide receiver that Carolina should consider is restricted free agent, going to cost a draft pick to get him. I'm talking about Doug Baldwin. Doug Baldwin, my opinion, has a chance to be a number 2 wide receiver at worst, and at best case scenario, actually at best, let me say it back, at best, Doug Baldwin can be a number 2 wide receiver, and at worst, is going to be a number 3 wide receiver. Baldwin has a chance even to become a number 1 receiver, even though I don't see it forthcoming. Baldwin also can return, punt, and a kickoff, so he's very good. He's an all-around wide receiver. As I mentioned before, he's going to cost a draft pick, but it might be worth considering walking out to trade with the Seahawks if you're Carolina. And additionally, beside Baldwin, Carolina should definitely look at Jacoby Jones. The Panthers last year tried to sign him. He said no. He signed with the Ravens. But Jacoby Jones is just 30 years old. He's a very good number 2 wide receiver. Can also be a great number 3 wide receiver. Can play out of the slot. The great return man. Very similar to what Ted Ginn Jr. did for the Panthers last year. So Jacoby Jones is someone Carolina should consider. Now, if Carolina is looking for just a return man, not as great of a wide receiver, but probably the best special return man in the NFL, kickoff punt. I'm talking about Trenton Holiday. Holiday, don't be confused by his height, folks. He's only 5'6", but this guy, once he has the ball in his hand, he is extremely dangerous. Probably the best return man in the NFL. The reason you have not heard about him so much is because he played for the Broncos last year, was a 4th wide receiver on the depth chart, but he's a very good return man. And if given a chance, I have a feeling he can probably be a pretty good 3rd wide receiver on a team that is not loaded. So Trenton Holiday should be a guy Carolina should consider more as a return man, but someone who has a chance to be a contributor on offense, perhaps as a 3rd wide receiver, more in line of a 4th wide receiver. Finally, secondary. Secondary is also very loaded with Anton Werner, Vante Davis, Courtney Finnegan, Akeem Talib, just to name a couple of the starters are going to be free agency. But if you look at some of the backup, some of, I should say, less known free agency, Carolina can still find a pretty good corner in free agency. One of them is Javier Arenas. He's a very good cornerback. In additionally, secondary, you can find Michael Jenkins. Used to play for the Saints. He's going to be a free agency. He's going to be a very good, can play cornerback, but he's more in line to be safety. So if Carolina cannot keep Mike Mitchell, Michael Jenkins is going to be a good free agency to look at. Finally, cornerback, probably going to be cheaper to sign, and definitely worth looking at is Anton Kaysen. He's still very young. Carolina should definitely look at him. And that is my list of free agency that I believe Carolina should go after. You can follow me on Twitter, Sports Guy Show. Let me know if you agree with the players who I believe Carolina should look at or not. And with that, the Sports Guy Show is signing